Button now. And we're live.
Thanks, Stace, and welcome everybody. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council for April 12th, 2021 to order. You have before you a copy of tonight's agenda. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Dowie and Councillor Anderson. I'm Councillor Dufert and Councillor Anderson. Oh, I'm starting off good. So any questions to the motion? None being noted, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Any declarations of interest? None being noted. Moving on to item number 4, announcements, awards, ceremonies, and presentations. Do we have anything from council? None being noted. SAO Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. One announcement that administration would like to pass on today. It's with our pleasure, I guess, to announce that we have successfully recruited Travis Wright for the position of the Director of Protective Services and Fire Chief. So Travis is an ex-Hay Riverite. He grew up here and spent several years with the Hay River Fire Department. I think he's well respected by that department, and we feel his leadership is going to align nicely with the strong culture and values that's established over there, especially due to the good work that Mr. Potter has provided in his time over there. So Travis has extensive experience related to fire and emergency services through not only the Hay River Fire Department, but other fire departments in the Northwest Territories. He's coming to us from MACA, where he's most recently, I guess currently, is holding the position of the Assistant of Fire Marshal in Fort Smith. He's had over 10 years of experience in that role. So a lot of experience in municipal regulations, fire standards, all the certifications required for fire and medical response. And very happy to have him back home. He starts on the week of April 19th. And which is very good for us, as we know that puts us into the heart of the breakup planning activities, and he'll gain a lot of valuable experience being alongside with Ross during that, and as Ross moves into his eventual retirement coming up end of May into June. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the team, Travis. So nothing else from council. We'll move on to item number 5, administrative inquiries, and I'll pass it back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very busy period of time as we move into the spring here with breakup, as well as into start of construction season. So I'm starting to see that in our agenda items. But we'll start off this week with an update from the Director of Finance, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'll keep my comments fairly brief as we've got a fairly full schedule this evening. Continuing work in the year-end audit and Q1 financial statements, working towards having that finance committee looking at next week to try and get that information in front of council as soon as possible. I've got the utility bylaw presentation this evening also, where the tax sale provision is on the agenda for this evening. We didn't have a tax sale last year due to COVID, and we think this process is important as it allows for delinquent properties to be sold to recover balances owing to the town. That is it for my updates for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Do we have any questions from council for our Director of Finance? None being noted. Back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Director of Protective Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few updates from my end of things. So far, it's looking like we're going to have yet another busy month. We're up to 26 emergency responses as of right now. 21 of them being medical related. We've had 4 fires and 1 false alarm. Thankfully, all the fires we had were all minor in nature. But just a reminder to everybody out there, it'd be a really good time for people to start thinking about cleaning their chimneys and stuff like that if they're going to be using their wood stoves. That's what the greatest proportion of the fires were caused by over the last week or so. As far as breakups concerned, monitoring equipment is now in place at the West Channel, Paradise Valley, and at the Falls. I expect to get Pine Point Bridge equipment in place tomorrow afternoon, now that the electrical services has been finally installed at the bridge there. I'm still trying to resolve a couple of communication issues that should be fixed up this week. We expect to be online next week with all the stations. Ice readings will be done this week, so we will have an idea of what we're looking at for ice and water under the ice. And that'll give us a fairly good idea of what we can expect as breakup goes through as time goes on. We're putting final touches on our evacuation procedures in compliance with GNWT's evacuation guidelines under COVID-19. And we'll be communicating those in more detail to the public sometime this week. For evacuees that are not in self-isolation, they will have the option to evacuate with friends and family upon meeting health requirements, or find accommodations at the Hayward Community Center in the RV, and also we'll be offering accommodations in the RV park. We recommend that the residents of Vail Island have discussions with friends and family off the island for short-term accommodations. As far as the communications tower is concerned, the tower arrived in town today. They're going to be starting to work on assembling the tower tomorrow. We expect to have everything up and operational by April 18th, just in time for the annual breakup. And I've also been informed a new ambulance was shipped and it's on its way to Hay River. And with any luck at all, we may see it in service as early as the end of next week. And that concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you, Director. Does council have any questions for our Director of Protective Services? Back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. The Director of Public Works and Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. From the public works side of things, this past week, our guys have been working at clearing away some of the snow piles around town just to assist with drainage during the spring melt. We've also had a couple of sewer freeze ups that we've had to deal with recently, so getting those done. Been working on some other breakup, spring melt, flood mitigation work along with the Director of Protective Services and our SAO on getting some things arranged for some flood protection out in the Vail Island area this year. A few items that are later on our agenda that I've been working on recently, getting some contracts lined up for our capital projects for this summer. So there's the Riverview and Beaver tender later on our agenda. Also been reviewing the RFP submissions for our zoning and building bylaw review. So that contract should be moving forward shortly here. Other items there, the GNWT is holding an NWT water stewardship strategy workshop Tuesday to Thursday mornings this week. So I'm going to try and attend that when I can, when I don't have other things on the agenda. And I think that's all of my updates for this week.
Thank you, Director. Does council have for our Director of Public Works? Deputy Mayor Boucher, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question on, someone was asking me about culverts. There's some culverts that we kind of traditionally steam out. I'm not sure, I didn't exactly get the direction of where they were, but are we looking at doing some of that stuff that we typically do? And I know highways typically does some. I'm not sure if we touch base with them just to help with some of the drainage.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we will be checking, I guess, all of our culverts that we normally do, ensuring we get drainage. I think this week when things warm up, we'll get a better idea of where we're at, and we'll certainly be working to do all of our typical spring activities in preparation to assist with the drainage, I guess. And ensure things move as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. Any further questions for our Director of Public Works? None being noted, back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. And I'll just add as well that it is on our breakup planning documents through the support of infrastructure to be working on the culvert or the drainage that flows along the highway on Vail Island. So they're well aware of that. And actually, I think we have another EMO meeting scheduled for this Friday. So a good opportunity to have some discussion on that as well. For myself, I'll just add a couple items. Actually, I'll note first off that the Director of Recreation and Community Services is off today. Under his area, actually, a couple announcements. One, we're very happy to announce that we have received we submitted an application for the Community Tourism Coordinator. We've been using that program now, I think, for 4 years. And it subsidizes our wages of our wages and training of our sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the position now. Peter McGill, anyways. Tourism coordinator, economic and development tourism coordinator. So anyways, we submitted an application for that. We did not think that we would get it. We did not budget for it, but we were happy to hear that we are receiving it now. So we're just working through executing that agreement, but that will provide subsidized salaries in the next 2 years. Also very happy to announce that we, in partnership with the A River Senior Society, ENR, and through some support from Super A as well, that we've moved forward with the execution of our food cycler agreement and the pilot project. So tied to that, the food cycler, if you recall, it's a food dehydrator. It's used for composting organics, or as a fertilizer, I think it's actually referred to as. But it diverts organic waste from the landfill, which is important. We're running with 100 units in our pilot project. I think I'm hearing about half of them have already been sold, and we've subsidized that through the programs of ENR. And so I think they're now going to be selling some for about $180. And yeah, the waste diversion, I think estimates associated with the 100 units for 1 year would be around magnitude of 30 tons. So very happy to have that project going, and really thank especially the Senior Society for supporting that. Other things on the go, we did put our taxi bylaw proposed changes out to the public for some input ahead of third reading. So the deadline for responses is April 14th. We have received 3 responses that I'm aware of so far. Also, we are working through the purchase and land transfer agreement for the land use associated with the fish plants. So that is the GNWT acquiring land from us. So they have our documents and are reviewing the purchase sale agreement. So that's good. Also a note for any summer students that might be interested in applying to work for the town of River for the summer. We have approximately 15 positions, which are funded through various contribution arrangements. The deadline for those applications are this week, April the 16th. And we plan to start putting people to work in early May. And I think that's all I have for you today, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for our SAO? Everyone's getting off easy tonight. Okay, being no questions, we'll move on to item 6A. Tourism and Economic Development Report for March 2021. Looking for a motion. Councillor Chambers, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Go ahead, Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the Tourism and Economic Development Report for the month of March 2021 as presented.
Thank you. That was seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I know I had a couple questions here, but I can only find one right now. There's a wayfind signage plan that we got some funding for. Can we get a description of what that is? I'm assuming that's kind of something geocaching, but I'm not sure. But wayfinding signage plan was approved.
SAO Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So when we refer to wayfinders, we are talking about information signs that point people to attractions within town or services. So through some of the strategic planning that occurred through our tourism development and marketing plan, it was identified as a gap in the community. So we received funding. I think that was supported through our Canmore Tourism Enhancements funding to do some more signage around town. So we will be using our standards to erect some signage in working with our advertising partner. There's a couple I think that are intended to go up just as examples actually for the Fisherman's Wharf Pavilion and the museum. Those should be coming up soon. And it's just the small signs that show 1 kilometer or point to directions towards that facility. So those would be that would be an example of what wayfinder.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to compliment administration and Peter McGill for putting together such an in-depth development report. And it's nice to see some things, activity with social media and so forth. So thanks for the hard work that Peter and everybody's been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Nothing noted. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 6B, Emergency Services Report for March 2021. Looking for a motion. Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I move that the Council of Town of Hay River approve the Emergency Services Activity Report for March 2021 as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Dufert. Any questions to the motion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 6C is Municipal Enforcement Report for March 2021. Looking for a motion. Councillor Dufert, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the Municipal Enforcement Report for March 2021 as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Chambers. Any questions to the motion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 6D, Public Works Report for March 2021. Looking for a motion. Councillor Dufert, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that the Council of the Town of Hay River approves the Public Works Report dated March 2021 as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dowie. All in favor, or any questions to the motion? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, just again, I marked these things on Friday and I'm not sure they didn't stay there. Something about there's a rubber backhoe or a backhoe that we're purchasing or we have purchased. Oh, there it is. Is that just a rubber? I'm assuming that's a rubber backhoe, not an excavator.
Okay. SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just pass that on to the Director of Public Works and Services, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, it's to replace our current one, which is getting on in years, and yeah, it's just a replacement of that one.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Are you good, Deputy Mayor? Sorry, thought I saw your hand. Go ahead. Oh, you're good. Okay. If nothing further, looking for all in favor. Thank you. Motion carries. Item 6E, application for variance request, yard setback. Looking for a motion. Go ahead, Councilor Willows. Brian, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get it off. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry.
I'll move that the council of the town of Hay River review and approve at their discretion development permit number D21-005 to allow an extra relaxation to the rear yard setback of the newly relocated existing cabin.
Thank you. Seconded by? Counselor Anderson. Any questions to the motion? None being noted, all in favor? Thank you, motion carries. Item 6F, sublease of lot 1055, Plan 2432, Market Garden, Yvette Bruno, looking for a motion. Counselor Dowie, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of Town of Hay River direct administration to forward a bylaw to council for approval to proceed with the application of Yvette Bruno to sublease lot 1055, Plan 2432 as expansion to her property on lot 1009, Plan 1259. This sublease will be for market gardening purposes only.
Thank you. Seconded by? Counselor Willows. Any questions to the motion? Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yeah, I know just in some of these market gardens areas where we expanded like that, once the property gets switched to somebody else, I'm wondering if there's a tie to the current owner's property. I know they're saying an expansion to her property, but I know in Paradise Gardens, we've had opportunities where, you know, the properties change hands and now someone has access problems. I think we're trying to build access road here to this property, but I'm not sure. Maybe just a little more detail on that.
You bet. SAO Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. So you can see the map on the screen there, gives a better visual of what's going on. But the properties that are in purple are commissioner's lands, whereas the orange are titled, owned from the town. So the one that's being highlighted there is the lease that's being requested through this motion. And some of the other lots beside it are also leased by people who have adjoining properties on the frontage side. So with Market Gardens, what we are looking at, it's actually in our capital plan. I think it shows construction for the road next year of the possibility of the town acquiring the commissioner's land, so getting title to those lands. And then as part of our bylaw requirement in that scenario, we are supposed to develop a road so that those properties can be accessed. But since this is a lease agreement for just expansion, it just notes that if they are to access the road, it must be through their own roadway.
And that is adjacent to her existing property, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's the longer skinny one above it.
Right. Thank you. Anything further from, Counselor Dowie, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, with that point though, I guess my thought, if this proceeds with an expansion onto that property, when we go to build an access road through there might be a fence cut across where we want to build our road. I'm not sure where we'd be looking at exactly building that road in there, but if we're going to have to build a road to access that property, it might be harder to do in a couple of years if that thing is, you say you can't access it. So I guess maybe just something that would be worth mentioning to the person applying for the lease, that there may come a point where the town builds a road through your property, if that would be the case.
Thank you. Duly noted. SAO Smith?
Yeah, I think we take that as good information to ensure that there's protection for both ourselves and the leasees. So there has been some preliminary design work, but more would be needed on this project if it proceeds further.
Okay. Any other questions from council? None being noted. All in favor? Okay. Motion carries. Item number 6G, tender award for Riverview Drive, Beaver Crescent. Looking for a motion. Counselor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River award the Riverview Drive and Beaver Crescent tender to 851791 NWT Limited Rose Construction in the amount of $8,880,139.55. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dufert. Any questions from council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, maybe if I could just get some more details, like obviously it was over budget a little bit and we found ways to lesser the amount. And I guess my only concern is what corners are we cutting, if any, to get to the, an adequate price to go forward with the project. I'm just, as far as the development wise, what are we moving so that, so that we meet the budget amount? I'm just a concern that, in future years, we may have issues where we have to spend more money there, or yeah, if I could just get more details on what we're moving to make it fit.
Absolutely. That was my questions. What is involved in getting a negotiation down, and how does that affect us as the end user? So yeah, I'll pass that back to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'll just start off that I think as the report indicates that we did receive the one bid from the one proponent. There was issues with budget, but we did get into negotiations given that the circumstances allowed to. So I can pass it on to the Director of Public Works and Services to speak to some of the key changes. There were some provisional items and maintenance and some changes to the sub base, I think, which are the primary concerns that you might want to get more information on. So I'll do that now.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, as SAO Smith mentioned, the main items that we negotiated, adjusted. First off, we removed, there was provisional items in there for an extra stretch of water line replacement. That item we took out. Could be included in, I guess, the next section of Riverview that, may be planned for a few years down the road. Was put in as provisional, just kind of, if our bids did come in lower, then we would have included this. But yeah, it was something that we were looking to take out as the first item. Secondly, some of the maintenance on the road in the, I'll say the winter season between, so it's a 2-year project with, as we typically do with the water and sewer, the underground being done in 2021, and then the paving being done in 2022. And so typically the contractor would be responsible for the maintenance of the road throughout that time period from when they start until the end of the contract. So we've reduced the amount that they'll be responsible for maintaining the road. They'll need to do it while they're working on the project, essentially, and then the town will maintain the road in the winter season when they're not working on the project. So that reduced the contract amount a lot there. So it'll be more O&M on our side of things, but not necessarily more than we would typically do in the winter time anyways. Once the road's complete, it'll be ours to maintain at that point. And then the other item, there's a few other minor items, but the other significant item would be the sub-base thickness. We've reduced the thickness of our 50 mil from 500 millimeters down to 400. In discussing this with our consultant, it'll still give us a quality product. One thing that we're gonna have to do during the course of the project, which we will have our consultant monitoring closely, is just to monitor the native material underneath that sub-base layer to ensure that it's in good condition. We do still have a provisional item in the contract for pit run for any areas of that that native lower material that is not in good condition. So it's just something we'll have to monitor more closely on this project, so that if we do come into any pockets where there is material that's not as good down further, we would use some of the provisional item for pit run to excavate a little more from that sub base material and put in pit run in order to ensure that we have the base that we need. But for the most part, our consultant does assure us that we will still get a quality product road out of it. So those are the major items. There was a couple other minor ones that the contractor did lower their price a little bit during our negotiations with them.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from council? Go ahead, Councillor Willows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I'm approaching this as the chair of the Finance Committee, so I've got a couple of concerns here. One is we do cost projections for our capital budgeting, and obviously this is beyond what we budgeted. So I guess the first question is there a problem with our cost projections? My other concern is when we only get one person bidding on a job, we have no way of testing the market. So I have no clear picture of whether our cost projections are invalid or if we're just not getting competitive bids because there's only one bidder. So, I mean, we're talking about $1 million difference in the bid and what we went back to. So I guess the next concern is we have no risk analysis whatsoever as it relates to the changes we're making to this project and what are the risks going forward and what are the potential downsides. I mean, I hear that the consultant said everything's fine. Well, that's word of mouth. I don't see any evidence in front of me that tells me that. So I guess this is a concern, like value for money spent, and we have no way of testing the market price. So those are some of my concerns going forward. And something is just not sitting right here when we have consultants who put our cost projections together and then they come in obviously nowhere near what the bid comes in. Something's missing in between those two steps. Thank you.
SAO Smith.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to take a shot on those three, and I'll just ask the Director of Public Works to add anything that I may have missed. I heard three key points there. First one was around our budgeting and estimating process. So, in terms of we have our internal resources, but we also rely heavily on our Stantec as our engineering partner. And they have a pretty detailed methodology. We've discussed. Obviously, it was a concern coming back with some of the unit pricing that occurred through this. So we've adjusted, quantities primarily to get to where we need to be. I shouldn't say primarily. We mentioned that we removed our provisional items and taken on some maintenance work. But some of the unit pricing, it wasn't aligned with our cost projections. We've done very similar work in a very similar area with similar contractors just recently, so that does play heavily into our estimating. And that was one area there that provided a pretty significant variance to us. So unfortunately, we don't have a really. We've had some conversation with the opponent on it, but. The reality is that's their pricing coming in based on their material supplies and what they've been exposed to in recent projects as well. In terms of testing the market, I guess I can speak to the process that was followed. Typical process in terms of advertising through the newsprint, website, social media. Council meetings. We also this year use a online system called Bids and Tenders, which is communicated through the tendering process as well. But that is an online mechanism so that potential proponents across the country can see and access tenders that are available. So we've done that. I think we had eight or nine proponents, or at least 8 or 9 firms that picked up packages. We saw the major, some of the key major contracting companies pick up those packages, but only the one proponent decided to submit. So yeah, I mean, it went through a competitive process, I guess, or at least advertising, and this is what we're left with. In terms of the risks of the project, I think the Director of Public Works has gone through those in terms of the design changes associated primarily with the subbase and how we're managing those risks. The other elements of the maintenance that we will be taking on, there are a little bit of risk, a little bit of cost to us. I think we have some capacity and we have the equipment to do that, but we will be working closely with our engineer and if this is awarded with the contractor as well, to ensure that's done and minimize risks and communication to the public as well. The other risks really are to upcoming projects. So projects of similar nature, are we going to see more competition? Are we going to see similar pricing that comes back beyond our estimates, or are we adjusting our estimates? So it's a few bits of unknowns there, but we do try to manage the risks moving forward with subsequent projects. And it's been an ongoing topic for the town for many years, but we do have some strategies to try to ensure that we're getting good market pricing.
Thank you. Further? Councillor Willers, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the SAO. I guess my next question would be, I know we deal with Stantec. I don't know if that is who the consultant on this particular project was in putting the projections together, but do we go back to them, failing the ability to test the market? What are our options? Can we go to Stantec and say, does this ring true from a market price point of view in terms of the cost for this project? Like, what's changed so significantly from the time that we did the projection to the time of this quote? I guess that's my question.
Thank you. SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I said, there's conversations have occurred, especially through the negotiations. I want to be a little careful, I think, on sharing some of the information, especially with the decision, I guess, that's on the table of whether council wishes to proceed with the award of the tender. If you want, we could go into a in-camera portion just to ensure that commercial information is not going to be prejudicial to other municipal corporations, I guess, that are involved right now. So yeah, I guess a little difficult to get a full response without getting into details that are probably of commercial value to our proponent.
Or confidential nature, I hear you. Does council want to take a quick sidebar and go in camera before we approve, or how do you want to proceed? Go ahead, Councillor Dewey.
Your Worship, I think that would make sense. I could make that motion if you like.
Absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Councillor SAO has something there, I think, first.
Yeah, just it's a bit new grounds for me, but just to think of our technology and how we're managing the meeting as well. It might be worth, I don't know if it's considered tabling or just making that motion so that we go into camera at the end of the meeting when we do have it scheduled for other in-camera items. And
yeah,
then
absolutely.
We'd have to start another meeting and come back and make any decisions after that. But I think we can do that as opposed to going back and forth.
Yeah,
right?
we can table it and come out of in camera with motion. Go ahead, Councillor Dewey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Then motion to table.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Willows, all in favor? Okay, motion's tabled and we'll bring it back after. Thanks, guys. Moving on to item 6H, excused absence for Counselor Grunewagen. Looking for a motion, please. Counselor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Move the recommendation that the Council of Town, however, excuses Councillor Greenwagon from the regular meeting of Council Monday, April the 12th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Dufert. Any questions to the motion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 6I, property tax sale provision. Looking for a motion. Counselor Dewey, go ahead. You're on mute, Keith. Sorry.
I wasn't. Then I was. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation that the Council of the Town of Hay River, in accordance with the Property Assessment and Taxation Act, RSNWT, 1988, Chapter P-10, Section 97.6. 1, sets the date of public auction where taxable property will be offered for sale as June 10th, 2021 at 9 a.m. in Town Hall Council Chambers. And 2, that the minimum sale price of each taxable property as calculated in accordance with the regulations is provided for as follows. And can get Stacy to scroll down there. I'll have to pull it up on my phone.
There we go. You need to go up a little bit, Stace.
No, that's good. That's good. It's just as long as that it's shown on there, that's part of the motion. I'm not reading all of those.
It is a little long. Okay. Perfect. Need a seconder to the motion. Counselor Willows, any questions to the motion? None being noted. Oh, Counselor Dewey, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. And I think I've asked this question before, and I just kind of want to touch on it again to what the town's options really are in these situations where taxes are owed on some properties that have been owed for significant amount of time, have ended up in tax auction situations in the past and haven't been purchased, and then nothing comes from that. Really, what happens next, or what steps does the town have, I guess, in order to try to rectify that, in the sense that if they just continue to not pay their taxes and continue to end up in these auctions and no one ends up buying the property for whatever reason, where does the town go with that step?
Thank you. SEO Smith?
Thank you, Worship. I think so the Property Taxation Act, it's pretty detailed and can be complex in here, but I think we're probably keeping it at a fairly high level. So I'm going to ask, though, that the Director of Finance field that question if he's comfortable with it right now.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. So the legislation that this falls under is PATA, Property Assessment and Taxation Act. It sets forth a minimum sale price for the property, which is based on 50% of the assessed value. So what, if my understanding is correct, there's properties that sit for many, many years and no one bids on them, potentially because the market value of the property is less than 50% of the minimum assessed value. One of the options that the town does have to remedy this is to trigger a reassessment on those properties when the time comes. So potentially, if the value could be at a higher level, a common example could be, if someone passes away, the property is in an estate, the estate isn't being handled or is just being ignored. That property could be sitting on there at a very high value, and taxes could be accruing on it at that high value, but no one's ever going to pay it. So in those instances, the town is really can't do anything until it reaches that 50% of the assessed value, at which point the town could put in a bid and clear what's owed to it. Again, at that point, we're looking at taking a hit on those taxes, and it can take many, many years to get to that point. Through discussions with MACA, that is one of the items that our community's brought forward that we'd like for them to take a look at, is whether or not that 50% threshold makes sense. In other jurisdictions, they don't have that requirement. It's if you owe taxes and you're delinquent, whatever the tax authority can collect, so long as they're getting what's owed to them, they will sell it to collect that. The other thing that, as it currently sits, if someone does bid the minimum sale price in a property, and the delinquent party has 30 days to redeem for what's owed on that property. So that has in the past deterred some people from bidding. That again is one of the things that we request Pat to look at. As in other jurisdictions, it's immediate. It's on the day it's sold. So there are some things that we can do as a municipality. Like, as I said, we can request that a reassessment be done on parcels that have been delinquent for many years. But we are quite restricted by the legislation as it currently sits. And until that changes, there's not a whole lot we can do on that front. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Go ahead. Further, Councillor Dewey.
Yeah, it does answer it, Your Worship. Thank you. And I guess just for clarification, just to make sure that I do understand it, is the town, if we were to have interest in one of these properties, would basically just show up to the auction like everybody else, and we'd bid on it at that price, and that would be our next best hope at collecting those taxes someday. So I guess because of territorial legislation being what it is, we're kind of a little stuck in place on a lot of these. Is sort of where I'm getting at.
That's correct. SAO Smith, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to comment on that. I mean, first off, I wouldn't mind saying that like the list that's presented right now is expected to go down significantly by the time you get to an auction, just through the nature of the risks involved, right? A lot of these properties, they owe, it could be $200, but it's, sorry, I guess it's 2 years of arrears before you get to this level, but it can be significantly lower than the minimum sale price. So it's a pretty powerful tool to encourage people to pay their arrears. I think last year the list dropped down to about 13 properties. So I looked at the total amount of owing on their arrears, very similar to prior years' numbers as well. We do have the high rise, which has a significant tax bill associated with that property type. So that is growing in a risk that we're trying to manage, but this is a pretty effective process, I think, to go through to deter from people from actually not paying their taxes and other arrears. So the list should drop. We have the opportunity as a town to purchase in competition, or to submit a minimum or to submit a purchase amount with other bidders. And the other bidders, I think their requirement is to put 25% down. And then the property owner has 30 days in order to fix their arrear situation before that sale would occur.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? None being noted, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 6J, utility bylaw 1786K amendment. Need a motion. Councilor Willows, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council of the Town of Hay River accepts the report on bylaw number 1786K/utility bylaw as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by? Councilor Dufert. Any questions to the motion? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Was this bylaw brought to any of the committees, like as far as Finance Committee or I'm not sure what other committees would look at it, but it's just like, I'm just wondering if anybody's reviewed this.
Yes, it was in front of, I believe it was policy as well, maybe not. I think it was I in finance? Was it finance, SEO Smith? I believe it was finance.
Correct, your worship, with finance, I think it's been there twice now. Sorry, the report doesn't mention it here, I don't believe, but that is the case. Oh yeah, it does say brought to the finance committee. So it has been there twice.
Thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
So there's a couple things. So can I just get clarification? Are we removing summer rates?
SEO Smith.
Thank you, your worship. I'm just debating. We do have a presentation that we've attached to the file, and the plan was to have the director of finance run through that. It might serve to answer some of the questions before they're asked. Maybe if you're all right with that, we would just jump into that. Like,
Absolutely.
Hold your question there, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Do you want to jump into that now, Sam?
Certainly, just one moment. I'll just get that on my screen here. Okay, is everyone able to see my PDF of the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Your Worship. So again, this presentation, it's a summary of changes we made to the 2021 utility bylaw. So I'll start off with just a review of what the utility fund is. Then I'll discuss the guiding principles behind the fund's performance, and the findings of the cost of service study, which we performed. And I'll go through the revisions that were made. The next two slides, I always include these as part of our budget process. So it's really just if anyone's looking at the presentation, that they'll have this information. But the utility fund deals with all financial activities relating to the town's water and sewer system. The budget for this fund is approved on an annual basis as part of the O&M budget process review. The utility fund is intended to be self-liquidating, which means revenues should exceed expenditures in every fiscal year, and it needs to be budgeted in that way as well. Some of the guiding principles on the fund, which we considered as part of the process looking at rate changes. The first is that the town should endeavor to provide water at a rate that's affordable to our residential customers. The fund should also be able to use reserves to fund capital replacement to the extent that the general fund does so. This hasn't been the case in several years, as the utility fund's capital replacement has been very heavily dependent on CPI, gas tax, and other third-party funding. One of the other principles is through tiered consumption, we're trying to encourage water conservation. We also look for ways to minimize the administrative overhead in the fund, such as encouraging paperless billing and amalgamating the sewer subsidy into the rates. So the utility fund's performance, it's primarily driven by three variables. We generate revenue through the sale of water. We receive funding from the GWT through MACA, and there's a cost to deliver the service. We have a trucked water contract, which we pay for. It's a third party that provides our water delivery system through trucked water. We also have maintenance costs for our water treatment and piped water delivery system, amortization, etc. The fund's performance, So rates have not been increased in our utility fund since 2016. During that period of time, CPI has been 1.5–2% per year. So we are getting behind in terms of inflation. We currently don't have an active trucked water contract with the service provider. In 2019, the rates were increased by 15% and have been increasing since. The 15% came after several years of no increases, which had been written into the contract that they were to be getting inflationary increases, and that hadn't been done. So that was a catch up for them. But we haven't increased our rates to reflect that in that period of time. The majority of our cash expenditures in the fund are driven by our trucked water contract. About 80% of the subsidy funding that we receive from MACA goes to our trucked water customers. Based on the calculation that MACA does, trucked water delivery should only account for about 25% of our cost. So as a result, we're applying, based on their formula, a disproportionate amount of that funding to trucked water customers. So as we got into this issue, we wanted to understand where our costs are being driven from. And I presented to the Finance Committee the full detail, but this is really the conclusion of the cost of service study, which is that current rate revenue for 2021, based on where we anticipated things would be, we're going to be under collecting by about $360,000 annually based on the current rates, current level of funding, and the current costs. As part of that study, it was determined that the trucked water customers are materially underpaying, and that our piped water customers are slightly overpaying.
Sam, that said slightly underpaying.
Oh, my mistake. Yeah, the piped water customers were, it was very, very, very close. I guess the material difference was on the trucked water side. So when we looked at our next 5 years of capital needs within this fund, one of the assumptions was that, and this again was based on our 10-year capital plan, that all of our funding was going to be coming from CPI, gas tax. And by all of our funding, I mean the town's share. So there was no anticipated draws from the utility reserve, as we haven't been basically building that reserve up based on where our rates are at. So the study came back and it recommended an increase based on the study of 12.5% to our piped customer, 13% to economical and outside municipality, and 12% per year for 3 years to our trucked water customers. So this information was then brought to the Finance Committee, and we reviewed so we started by looking at the previous version of the bylaw, and we tried to incorporate the results of that cost of service study into the recommendation for the rate increase. One of the considerations is that concept of equity. So, how much does it cost for the average customer that's in piped water versus the average customer on trucked? What does increases look like on those trucked waters? Is it still reasonable to put through those costs as it sets? And we also looked at the current classification of customers. Between trucked and piped, we didn't have consistency between whether or not there was residential, commercial, industrial, or government. So we created those classifications, which, again, I think that one of the principles is that we subsidize residential costs, but we're not necessarily looking to subsidize commercial, industrial, or government. Government, can stand on their own. Commercial, industrial, they're operating profit-based businesses, so water is a cost of their business. And as part of the formula for what MACA uses, they're not looking at commercial, industrial, or government customers. The subsidy is driven based on residents. So again, we also built into our structure previously. It was a Word document. It was all written out. We looked at what Yellowknife did. They've got like a chart type format, so we incorporated that structure. We also included multiple years of data, so multiple years going forward, which again is consistent with how Yellowknife has their utility bylaw. So as a result of all these changes, we got, when I look at 2020 consumption, it's a 12.7% increase. So again, those are, it depends on the customer class, but we're looking at an average of 12.7%, which when initially, and again, just for a bit of context, in 2020, council approved a 10% increase to the utility fund, or sorry, as part of the 2020 budget, council approved that increase. We did not implement it in 2020. That was a result of a decision by council to provide some relief due to COVID-19. So we deferred that implementation as part of the 2021 budget process. Council approved a 2.5% increase for 2021 and implementation of the 10% from 2020. So our target was 12.5, and we're looking at an estimate of 12.7 based on the 2020 consumption. So in conclusion, the rate changes recommended are a start at closing the gap. The fund is still materially under collecting from some customers, and the GNWT acknowledges that gap. Based on their formula, we should be getting $1.4 million per year. There's some of the assumptions in that formula that I think need to be tested and revised. I think the last time that it was looked at was 6 years ago. And even then, the number that they come up with, they only give us 75% of it. So they acknowledge that that gap exists. As I said, as part of this, I've included the 2022 through 2025 rates. Those would be subject to revision during the O&M budget process. We'll see where this lands. None of these are set in stone. Council can increase them, decrease them, or whatever based on the situation that we're in. But as it sits right now, there are 4% across the board for the next 4 years included in those rates. Since for 2021, the rate increases were relatively evenly distributed. That was the direction that we'd received from the Finance Committee. The gap between our piped water customers and our trucked water customers' contribution, that will continue to grow. So that will need to be considered in the future when we're looking at how that subsidy is applied. So that concludes my presentation. I can answer Deputy Mayor Bouchard's question about the summer rates. That is something that we were removing. It was not utilized by many customers. It's something that had to be requested, turned on, turned off in the system. And it's, again, as part of the process of removing that administrative overhead, that was removed. Thank you.
As well as encouraging people to use less water. So further questions from council, comments? Deputy Mayor Bouchard, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know much about the summer rates that you had to apply for them. I thought we just had a summer rate. Sorry, I didn't know that much of that information, but I'm just wondering about, and I appreciate all the hard work that's been done here. I think there's been lots of work on it, and I know the numbers are complicated. One of the questions that I had was, like we're looking at doing rate increases, and obviously we're trying to get to somewhere. But I mean, obviously maybe this is the first step, I guess, but the question would be, without renewing a contract or a water delivery contract, can we be estimating some of these numbers? I guess that's one contract I've been asking to move forward on. Yeah, I just concerned if we don't know what that market rate is now going forward. So is there any discussion on that?
I'm just going to caution you, Deputy Mayor, that, and I'm sure that's why Councillor Dowie has his hand up, but this is to update our bylaw. This is something that council has already approved in budget, the numbers. I think the new one that's come out of it is the summer rate, water rate. So that would be something under discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Dwayne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, and I don't want to, I guess, discourage any discussion around this, but if that is where this conversation ends up going is towards that, and on that topic, I'd just like the opportunity to declare conflict, and then I don't know how we'd want to run that on Zoom, if Glenn can just kick me out, or how that would work. But if that is, if we do want to get into that, I'm happy to step out.
If we can just get the answer written to me, that's fine. Is that something we should be considering in these things? That's something we can get answered to avoid the conflict. I did have a couple other questions though.
Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm just wondering about all the rate increases going forward. Or do we have the ability to do that as far as the council to approve budget increases for other councils going forward?
Okay, so to clarify, we had at the committee meeting, we all had the same concern that, we're not locking another council into something else. We'll come back during O&M time, as Director of Finance did allude to, that it would be something council would decide every year what type of increase would go through. These ones have been decided for 2021, but next budget session, we'd be doing the same thing, what we're looking at, and with the objective of trying to close that gap. So I feel I can answer that one. Go ahead again. Further, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I guess one area of concern that I had, and I've heard it from a couple people, is, the trucked water rate for the caretakers' residences, I guess, are very extreme. They've been extreme for a number of years. I want to say we're only dealing with a handful, maybe 10, 12 people. So I'm just, has those rates been looked at? I did see it in the bylaws as a separate entity. So is that something that the committee talked about or reviewed?
Yeah, we did review it. SAO Smith, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. So under that scenario, caretakers receive the commercial rate. So all the categories are looking at rate increases. Can comment, I think trucked water commercial is less than 12.5%. I'm not sure if it's listed here in front of me. But we haven't, we haven't suggested any changes towards distinguishing between residential pricing, say, versus commercial for caretaker suites. So no, it's a low number, but it's I think positions I've heard from council before has been that, it's a sort of a decision to work or to live in and benefit from some of the commercial arrangements and not having, 2 property taxes as an example. So it helps a little bit with our community planning as well as ensuring people that live in are residing in residential areas as opposed to in commercial zoned properties where from a commercial standpoint, you are using water as a cost of goods sold to generate revenue. Director of Finance, anything I may have incorrectly said there?
No, everything you said is correct, SAO Smith. I just wanted to add that whether or not a location is on trucked or piped water does impact the assessed value quite significantly of that property. So for trucked water customers, there is a savings for them as a result of their property tax bill being lower just by virtue of them not being connected. So all of this stuff it's quite complicated, and I think we're sensitive to that. We're dealing with real dollars here. This is something that people see on their bills every month, and so that's why I think we tried to come up with a way to put in through these increases that are equitable. But yeah, I think SAO Smith spoke to the rationale for why we didn't make modifications to those caretaker rates.
Further, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I guess I do have a concern in that size of that caretakers. It's quite a bit more. Like I want to say it's 7-8 times the regular rate. And if it's a caretaker's unit versus just an industrial business, that's a different thing. If you can prove you have a caretaker's residence, some of that usage. But that's an area that I have concern with. I think that should be something that's looked at, you know, in a review. Like, I know we don't have a ton of them, so I know that there's not a big issue right now. Like, I would compare us to Yellowknife, where Yellowknife has a ton of them in their industrial area. We don't have a ton of them, and you know, it's an area of concern that's been brought to me several times, and it's just like some of those bills seem very extreme. So, area of concern. But I mean, my other concern is that you know, this is a big topic. This is another topic that, you know, goes out to the public, that's up for discussion, and it's at a regular committee. It's a regular council meeting. If we move this moves forward the budget or bylaw. So we're, again, like, I've had troubles, and I've had troubles in the past where we move some heavy topics that don't have any scrutiny of the public, especially us being on Zoom right now. Doesn't get any coverage, doesn't get any discussion in the public until we've approved it. So I understand some of this stuff is, whether it's reports and all this stuff, that's cookie cutter, but, you know, we're approving something that's going to affect you know, taxes and stuff like that on a one meeting, and then it's done, you know. So
That's
I mean,
not
I know
correct, Deputy Mayor. This will come back. It's under item number 7, bylaws. It is up for first and second, but we only have to do first reading tonight. This isn't, this item under 6J is the amendment, is basically the report.
Yeah, but we've already made the bylaw changes, and we have a bylaw created. So any of the discussion that's happening or any feedback we have to do, we have to go change the bylaw completely. So I just have concerns with us approving some of this stuff. Like, that's what we did with the taxi bylaw. We deferred it so that we could have public input into it. And obviously people are not going to be happy with tax increases, but maybe there's other issues that are out there that we're not putting to the public test, I guess.
Okay, so our normal process, we're following. I don't think we're pushing this through by any means. Tonight is first reading of our utility bylaw.
Yeah.
Is anything else? Right? And then it would have second reading, which is probably 2 weeks away. And third reading is how much further away than that?
Third reading could be as early as April 26th, depending on the interests of council. And I don't know, you've had 2 finance committee meetings on the topic. I don't know if there would be interest in going back to them at any point.
I guess my concern is that if we would have had this discussion in committee of the whole or regular, and then it gets out to the public, and then we have a meeting, you know, then we approve it, we go ahead with the bylaws and stuff. So I was just, you know, when we have a regular meeting and we haven't seen it before, we are approving stuff that's, some of them are big decisions. So, I mean, I would like to see them in before council and before the, you know, before the public for a little bit of period of time so we can get some feedback. Like I said, especially in a time when we're in Zoom and we don't have anybody coming to a meeting, or we don't have many people. So.
I hear what you're saying. So what are you suggesting, that we change our bylaw and how we move forward with stuff like this? Because this is our process. This is our procedures, councils, that, you know, I hear you that normally we would bring things, but this has been to 2 committee meetings. And now coming forward to council, and if anything, it goes to first reading tonight. And then there's still opportunity for 2 more readings after that. So definitely input, there is an opportunity for public input after each reading, right? So are you suggesting, how would you like to proceed? What do you suggest?
I'd like to hear what I see other councilors waiting, so I'll let them talk to it. So.
Councilor Anderson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Worship. No, I agree with our deputy mayor here. I think really in this type of situation and these kind of increases, I would be more comfortable with let's talk to our community residents and so forth, and get some feedback from them and that type of stuff before it goes to first reading. I think that's really the best way of dealing with this. And secondly, I know it's not a subject right now, but you know, I think we need to get this contract sorted out and dealt with. So thank you.
Thank you. Director of Finance, go ahead.
I'd just like to reiterate, Mayor Jameson, what we're bringing forth here is it's what council approved as part of the O&M budget process. We had for both the 2020 and 2021 budget process, public consultations. There was no interest from the public in looking at this, and council approved these increases. Where I think there should be additional discussion, and again, this within the finance committee, we did have these discussions, is in terms of some of the changes that we're making to customer classifications and that sort of thing. And there is opportunity to look at that, but the increases that we're putting through here, it's what council approved.
There's already a motion on it. Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, Councillor Willow.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I just want to reiterate, council's already approved these increases. We went through the O&M budget process. The community had an opportunity. Now, I'm all in favor of the community having as much input as possible, but it seems to me all we're doing is following our normal procedure. We're not passing this tonight. It's no different than what we did with the taxi bylaw. We went out at third reading. We decided to go to the community to get some input just to make sure we were on the right track. I'm not understanding, perhaps it's semantics, but I'm not understanding what the difference is. We've approved it. We're going through the process, and the community has all kinds of opportunity to give us feedback. So I made the motion and I stand by it.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, further?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. No, I get what everybody's saying here, but I guess my other point is that COVID is still with us, and we delayed this increase last year, and now we're putting it through this year. What's changed? And we're still dealing with the same situations in life, and it's and nothing's changed. We're still dealing with life's issues and so forth. And
okay, I'm just gonna stop you right there, because the motion on the table is directly speaks to utility bylaw 1786K amendment. So if we can just keep focused to that. So right now we're at questions on that motion and seconded.
yeah, but
going back, we're going backwards, Steve. If we go back, that would be budget. We should have had that, which we did have that discussion. So I just want to keep us focused so that, we can move ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Dory. I noticed you had your hand up. You're good. Okay. If there's nothing further, I'm looking for all in favor. So motion carries. Thank you. Item 7A, bylaw 2426, disposal of land bylaw. Looking for a motion. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
thank you, Worship. If we can be brought back up there. Oh, sorry. So recommend bylaw approval on 2426 LND-21, and that's a bylaw for pursuant to the Cities and Towns and Villages Act for April 1st, 2004, section 54, which states, I don't think I need to read that, do I?
No.
Okay.
My understanding that is putting 3 lots back into inventory. SAO Smith, did you want to comment on this?
You are correct. This is 3 lots in the Saskatoon Drive area. Was owned by the Housing Corporation, surrendered by the Housing Corporation to us.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Anderson, for the motion. Need a seconder to that motion? Councillor Dufert, any questions to the motion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 7B, bylaw 2426, acquisition of lots 1371, plan 1126, first reading. Councillor Dowie, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move first reading of bylaw number 2428/LND/21.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Chambers. Any questions from council? Go ahead, Counselor Dewey.
Thank you, Worship. Just for clarification, that's the lot that the community garden is on?
I believe so, but I will defer to SAO Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions from council? All in favor of the motion? Thank you. Motion carries. Looking for a motion, second reading on this. Go ahead, Counselor Joey, you're good? Yeah, go ahead.
Fighting with my computer. Thank you, Worship. I'll move second reading for bylaw number 2428/LND/21.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Chambers. Any questions to the motion? None being noted. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 7C, bylaw 1786K utility bylaw amendment, first reading. Looking for a motion. Counselor Dufert, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll recommend first reading of bylaw number 1786K/util from the Municipal Corporation of the Town of Hay River.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Willows. Any questions? None being noted. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So I'm going to assume that council would rather put off second reading. Any comments? Speak now. We're good with holding off on second reading and third reading, giving people time to absorb. Fair enough. Okay. Thank you. So my next one is in camera. So I'm looking for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Anderson, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Okay, all in favor? Okay, and before we do, I'm going to ask each and every one of you independently if you can turn your mics on for me. Do you solemnly swear and sincerely affirm that you are alone and cannot be overheard while in camera? Councillor Anderson.
I do, Your Worship. I swear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I swear.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
I swear.
Deputy Mayor Bouchard.
I swear.
Councillor Dufert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I swear.
Councillor Brian Willows.
I swear.
Thank you. Okay, guys. So thank all our directors and everybody. I'm not sure who's sticking with us for the next tour, but we've got a couple items and we've got to bring one back to vote on. So I'm going to give you, I don't know what time it is here. I got 7:53, 8 o'clock. Good. We'll be back here.